Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's also heard on IPMNation.org, Saturdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on our YouTube channel. Many of these shows that we upload to our YouTube channel, and we've had wonderful guests over the last couple of years. That's definitely worth your listening. And the show is brought to you by campconstitution.com, I should say .net. The camp, among other things, runs a day-long family camp. This year's camp, July 2nd to the 9th at the beautiful Toanipi Krishna Retreat Center in Ringe, New Hampshire. And you can visit our website to learn more about that and all of the other things we have to offer, a speakers bureau, of course, a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook page. We have some great resources and archives, which I'll be talking about a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. I just want to mention there's this book that I picked up. Now, last week we talked about the Sharia law versus the Constitution, and we hosted Father Michael Carl at an event in New Hampshire, in Troy, New Hampshire, just a few weekends ago, and he spoke to a group, and we videotaped that. It's on our YouTube channel, and he made some very interesting comments about the theology and where Islam is more than just a religion. It's more of a political movement, a social movement, and the fact that Muslims don't really have a concept of borders, and the idea of jihad is a perpetual thing. Well, that motivated me to read this book that I've had in my library for quite a while, I guess. It's called What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, A History of Islam and the United States. It's written by William J. Federer. Now, I have another book he does on America's Christian heritage, and this book was published, I think, in 2005 or 6. It's not a brand new book, but it's quite fascinating. He goes into the history of Muhammad, and he's not exactly a loving and wonderful person, quite just the opposite, and pretty much a history of conquest and mayhem and genocide. So it's something that's important so people can understand. Now, I'm not suggesting that all the world's Muslims agree to this or do this thing. Thank God they don't. But I think the American people really need to know. And I know there's a lot of people in the liberty movement that really don't seem to be very knowledgeable about this and almost sympathetic to the Muslim. Of course, the people on the left have embraced this, and I think they want to destabilize our society. But I don't think they know exactly what they're playing with. So I do recommend the book. It's probably available for a very short money on Amazon or any other book. What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran. Now, we just came back from the Homeschools of Maine's annual convention up in Rockland, Maine. We got up there last Thursday, and came back late Saturday night. It was a really good time. We met some great people, and of course, this is probably, we've been going there for a number of years, but we offered a free tuition to camp as an incentive to come by the table, but also we donated a free tuition to the organization's raffle, and actually had a nice bidding war for it, and several people were bidding on a week at camp, so I was very pleased about that. And one of the things that we offer at our tables, that I've discussed this before, is the 10-question quiz, so people can, on the U.S. Constitution, come by the table, take the quiz, and get a free copy of the Constitution. Now, generally, when we set up these tables at like a fair, which is something where you've got a good, a microcosm of the society who comes to these fairs. You get people from all different walks of life. And I realize that people don't come to a fair to learn about the Constitution. But anyway, usually at a fair, the people at the table do very poorly when it comes to the Constitution. They have very little knowledge. We gather 95% of them don't know they're a member of Congress. One year, former Senator Scott Brown came to the table, and he wouldn't take the quiz. But we did have one, Jim Rubens, who was running for the Senate, and he did take it and got an 80. But at this homeschool show, I was surprised that not too many, very few, even got a couple right. And these aren't necessarily, there's a couple of trick questions on there for the purpose of getting them to realize that something in the Communist Manifesto is not in the Constitution. And if you don't know the difference, then you really need to learn about the Constitution. So, we not one person, adult or teenager, got more than two right. And some of them really didn't even want to take it. Oh, gee, I got these two wrong, and I'm not going to. And that also validates the need for what we have to offer when we go to these events. But it's really exciting that we are able to reach out to people and to say, the old saying is that the realization of one's own ignorance is the essence of wisdom. So if you realize you need information, you need to learn. And now, you give me a science quiz, probably not going to do so well about it. A geography quiz, I'll do okay. But the Constitution is something for everybody. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be an astrophysicist. But you should know enough about the Constitution to be comfortable with it, to understand the job description of the president, of members of Congress, of the Supreme Court. And one of the reasons why we're in this mess is because very few people know it. Now, it was interesting that Alex de Tocqueville, who wrote the book Democracy in America, he visited this country in the 1840s, late 1830s, and he said that it was a phenomenon to find someone who does or was ignorant of the Constitution. Can you imagine? He said it was almost impossible to find anybody, any walk of life, that did not have a good knowledge of the U.S. Constitution. Well, today, that's just the opposite. It would be a phenomenon to find someone that does. And I contend that it was not by accident, but it was deliberate. And, of course, when you do have people, the so-called progressives, that teach this, they're teaching it from a different perspective. So one of the ways we're able to sort of combat that, of course, is not just offer people copies of the Constitution and instruction in the Constitution. You go to our YouTube channel, you find all kinds of classes on the subject. I gave a class last year at an event in Hyde Park, New York, Know Your Constitution, which is about a 30-minute talk, and just to get people familiar with some of the things. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be a Harvard law professor to understand. But one of the things we started, and I've discussed this more than once, is the Sam Blumenfeld Archives. And the very first thing was the How to Tutor. If you go to the website, you see a drop-down, and you'll see just all kinds of information, articles, videos, cassettes, not cassettes, but audio and video. But Sam, his lifelong ambition mainly was to get people to learn how to read phonetically. First, initially, it was to introduce it or reintroduce it into the public schools, government schools. And that was in the early 60s. And Sam was a publisher for Grosset and Dunlop. He worked on the Hardy Boys at Nancy Drew books. And it was a friend of his, Watson Washburn, who was a New York attorney, a conservative, that asked him to become part of his reading reform organization. And Sam said, why in the world would I need to do that? And he says, well, because people aren't learning how to read. And he said, well, how come? And he said, you need to read a book called Why Johnny Can't Read by Rudolph Fleisch. So Sam got a copy of the book. This book originally was published in 1956 or 57. Mr. Fleisch updated the book about 20 or 25 years later, Why Johnny Still Can't Read. And Sam read the book, and he realized that the educators, the so-called educators, the leftists, the progressive educators, and I hate to use the word progressive, there's nothing progressive about them, but that's how they're referred. Anyway, their goal, what they did is very successful, is introduce the look-say method of reading into our government schools. And then Sam, changed his life when he read this, and he established a friendship with Rudolph Fleisch. And on our website, you can see some of the letters that Sam, if you go to Other Miscellaneous, and it's there somewhere, he, let's see if I can find it here. But yeah, Rudolph Fleisch. It's on, I think, page 2 on the lower right-hand side, Education Continued, and he had a friendship with Rudolph, and Rudolph was a socialist. He even said so in his writings, and that's why he never formally joined any entities that Sam was working on. But he had respect for him, and he was an honorable socialist, and he realized that people needed how to learn how to read, and if you want to have a literate society. So he's sort of a rare breed in that regard. I guess he didn't realize that his fellow socialists were actually deliberately trying to make people illiterate. And to validate that, in 1898, John Dewey wrote an essay, which we reprinted at Sam Blumenfeld's request, and he said in this essay that it is not in the best interest of the American people to be literate. It's not necessary. And so what we're dealing with isn't something that just happened with Common Core. It happened well over 100 years ago. And a lot of people can't get their hands around that. They think, well, as long as they just if they have the information, they'll do the right thing, and so forth and so on. Well, it doesn't work that way. So we encourage people to visit our Camp Constitution website and look at the Sam Blumenfeld Archives. We're getting up to about 150,000 views per month, and a lot of material people are downloading. It's all free, but it also, you could spend a couple of months on this site and still probably miss a few things. But to get more attention to Sam's archives is we decided to create the weekly Sam on our blog, and what we do is very simple. We'll just highlight an aspect of the archive, something we think might be, we think everything's of interest, but it could be a topic. I think last week I wrote about Marva Collins, and Marva was a friend of Sam's. She founded the West Side Preparatory School, and I had some of the material. I think it was that Marva Collins, I can't recall, but Marva was, in fact, they made a movie about her, the Marva Collins story. He was a black teacher in Chicago, teaching the public schools, and she was pretty frustrated by the attitude of a lot of her fellow teachers and administrators. Basically, well, these kids can't learn. They're hopeless and helpless. And with her husband's, of course, help, they started a school right in their home, and eventually became they got a regular building. And unfortunately, it closed. She's since passed away, but it ran for a long time. And even celebrities like Prince helped donate money to it. But she took these public school kids that were troubled and underachievers, and she turned them into really well-educated, achieving. And Sam Blumenfeld always said, I can take your worst students you have in any school and turn them into great readers. Just give me the chance. And he used to write letters to mayors of cities, Newark, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts, New York City, and on. And he'd say, give me a chance. I'm not looking for much money. I just want to just demonstrate how it can be done very easily. And he sometimes got a response, thank you, but no thank you, but usually didn't get any response. And it just solidifies the idea that this was all done on purpose, this dumbing down on purpose. So now let me just share some of the things we on the site here. Again, we only have 15 minutes, there's so much, but the first thing I recommend, if you go to Tutor and then click on it's a blue highlights, Blumenfeld's Alpha-Phonics online. And there you can find the Alpha-Phonics workbook. You can download that. It's a free download. And then there's the lessons, and you can do the lessons either in the 128 lessons. You can do it on your own, of course, but if you want to be guided, Sam has these lessons in audio and video, and you can go to lesson 1 and listen to Sam. There's an introduction to the program. We also have cursive writing, how to teach cursive writing. And this is so important. Sam always advocated the idea that you write cursive first when you learn how to write. Now, public schools and government schools, it's just the opposite. You learn block. But as it was pointed out, as I've observed, you give a toddler a crayon or a pen or a pencil, and what's the natural when they start scribbling? They don't scribble in blocks. They scribble in circles, up and down, left and right, scribble. All you had to do is harness that scribble, and you can get someone probably with a decent handwriting. And it's also the right way to hold the pen or the pencil, so it doesn't hurt after writing a couple of sentences. Today, you can see most people, especially young people, the way they hold their pens and pencils, they're not even holding it right. He says one of them is the stab, and some of them they hold all 4 fingers and 1 thumb, and they're writing at an angle, what have you. And there's a right way to do it. and that helps with the handwriting and so forth, and prevents the hand from getting sore, and you can't write very long. He also has we also have some basic arithmetic in there too, learning some of the basic things of arithmetic. And this is what we think so important. I don't know if there's any other program online where you can actually learn how to read. Maybe, but I just don't know of any offhand. So you can download the workbook, the instructions. Then there's a list of testimonials, all the people that have used this very successfully, and how it's been used. Blumenfeld's handwriting online. You click that on, and it starts off with this was from his book How to Tutor. Introduction to it, and actually for left-hand, there's also a chapter for left-hand writers, and there's several pages of this. This is incredible. And let's see, then also basic arithmetic. This is today Blumenfeld's Arithmetic Online, and this is just things for the young people: addition, subtraction, column addition, higher decade addition, bringing in higher values, carrying in addition, subtraction. So this is basic. This isn't advanced calculus, but you got to start with the basics like anything else. If you want to learn a language, you got to start with some of the verbs and some of the easier things before you can build on it. So that's what Sam does in this. And then he has in the How to Tutor, dyslexia. Sam always believed, or ended up believing, that dyslexia was created artificially. It was almost unheard of 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago before the introduction of look-say. There may have been a few examples of that, and he pointed out that the Rockefeller brothers went to this John Dewey school, the experimental school in New York City, and they were functionally illiterate. Nelson Rockefeller even admitted it. So, and the way that the government agents cure dyslexia, they don't cure it, they just treat it. They treat it with drugs. They dope the kids up or dope them down, and mostly boys, but some girls have it. And Sam has written extensively on that, dyslexia, and you could look at the website, and let's see here, we got a whole section on that. Look-say causes dyslexia, dyslexia and what you should know, dyslexia, the disease you get in school, and let's see, school-induced dyslexia, what every doctor should know about dyslexia. They think it's a neurological thing. And then he's written several of his newsletters, which we have all his newsletters posted from the beginning to the end, year by year, but we highlighted these particular ones, and they're right on the website too. Then he has a guide on how to get started in homeschooling. Parents' Guide to Homeschooling in the Educational Crisis, High School, the Homeschool Way, Getting into Homeschooling. So a lot of people think, oh my goodness, this is, how am I going to do it? I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to teach. I don't know how to do this. And there is so much out there for the average parent. You don't have to be a professor to be able to get you into homeschool. You've got so many organizations and publishers. You have online accredited homeschooling programs. You have you could be eclectic like we do. We don't we use Abeka, but we also have other things too. Abeka can be a little overwhelming. It's for those who really want to get the full accreditation, and it's not too expensive. It's a little more pricey than most, however, but you'll get a batch of books and you get audios, videos, and you can sign up to be fully accredited, or you can do it on your own. So some parents start off with that, and then they look into other things. But there's just so many programs out there, and so many things, so many different. So it's not a question of, gee, what do I do? It's what do you choose? And there are a lot of homeschool groups. And a homeschool group, for example, let's say you get a group of parents and homeschoolers in a given area. They get together once a week or so, and there might be someone in that group that's a math teacher, and so they teach the math. Somebody else, a history teacher, a home ec, and they'll bring in speakers and talk about different things, and they go on field trips. And I met this wonderful family at the homeschool show this weekend where they sold their house and they bought a camper, and for a couple of years they hit the road. The husband was able to work online, and they visited so many historical sites, and they still did their homeschooling a couple of hours a day, and then they did their field trip, and they traveled throughout up and down the East Coast to the Midwest, and it was just a phenomenal experience. I mean, how can you, it was just amazing. So that's something that a lot of homeschoolers do, and we do encourage you, if you're a listener and you're thinking about, gee, the public schools are pretty bad, what should I do? Really look into homeschooling. Contact us, and we can put you in touch with a homeschool group in your area. Yeah, anyway, going back to the Sam Blumenfeld archives, we have a lot of his books. Now, he gave us the rights long before his passing, to put these in PDF format, and we did that with not all of them, but most of them. The Alpha-Phonics, of course, the phonics instructions, his book How to Tutor, which was one of his earlier books, Is Public Education Necessary? In fact, Sam points out that these compulsory education laws should be repealed. And it was interesting, too, that it started in the 1840s by a man named Horace Mann, who went to Prussia and Germany and came back and said, basically, that's the future. We should be adopting their model and their methods, and that's what we've done. And it was interesting. There were still some signers of there were still some people who were involved in the Constitution that were still alive at this time. So within a generation, we were promoting socialism. And Massachusetts was the first state to buy into it. And everything's gradual, too. It was just probably a couple of hours a day for so many weeks. And now, if you're a parent, you have children, your whole life revolves around the education establishment, when you go on vacation, when you take your days off. And it's just amazing. And people just think it was always that way. They don't even give it a second thought. Separation of school and state. The liberals talk about separation of church and state. We should have separation of school and state. And that was one of Sam's big. Now, one of Sam's earlier books, and perhaps the best as far as understanding the education problem, was the NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education. And we have that on our website, the Sam Blumenfeld collection. And this goes into the history of the NEA, goes back to the late 1800s, and how it was taken over, and how it's one of the biggest labor lobbies or labor unions in the country, and how detrimental they've been to education. And it's like educating the children is the absolute last thing on their agenda. They have a socialist agenda. They promote abortion. They promote the homosexual lifestyle. Now they're promoting the Muslim agenda as well. The Victims of Dick and Jane, that was a book, and it was a collection of his essays. And he goes in to talk about the Dick and Jane readers, that they were designed to dumb us down. I remember the Dick and Jane, the silly C-Spot run, oh, go, 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 Sally run spot, oh, go. People don't talk that way, but that's how they're set up, these things, to dumb our kids down. Then the Revolution via Education. He's got a book called The Whole Language, OBE. OBE was Outcome-Based Education. That was the scam that they were pushing back under the Clinton administration, outcome-based education. It's another type of Common Core, just an earlier version of Common Core. And he's got an important book, Homeschooling, A Parent's Guide to Teaching Children. So you can actually just go right to that website, download this book, and you can figure out how to do it. You can figure out how to homeschool your kids. So it's a great resource. What else do we have here? Let's see, other books that he has available. He's got some Crimes of the Educators. This was an early draft that we have of it, and the book called The New Illiterates. And then we have a lot of his book proposals. He had most authors, maybe for every book they write, they've got maybe a dozen books they didn't write. So he's got some outlines of some of the books that he didn't quite get. And we have some transcripts of his various speeches. And one of the transcripts was Hyde Park Academy, Education and Freedom, 1976. The school was just the next street over from me growing up in Hyde Park, in a section of Boston, and I never did know it until I met Sam. His role he played in that school during the height of forced busing. There was some local people who got together, started their own private schools. This school is no longer in existence, and unfortunately, they really didn't adopt a Christian perspective. It was probably like public school, the same similar curriculum, it just was in the private sector. But and they couldn't pay their teachers a whole lot. But it did run for about 20 years, and I'm sure. But it was just a great speech he gave on educational freedom. Let's see what else. Islamic Trojan Horse in America. That was a more recent article. He used to write for WorldNet Daily, and then he gave speeches to all kinds of different groups, and we have a lot of those transcripts on that site. I recommend his newsletters, and unfortunately we weren't able to catalog them according to topic, but you just look at the headline of each one. Oh, we do have an index for some of them, not all of them. So you can go to the index, so just 1986, but we don't have the indexes for all of them. But he wrote so many good essays, and some of it was political commentary, which maybe talking about the Clinton administration, maybe not at this point, maybe not that important. But he wrote so much he wrote a lot about death education too. In fact, I had some articles where I think it was in Michigan, parents, the teachers brought in this film and showed it, and then they got the film out. The film doesn't stay there. They truck it in the morning, ship out before the end of the day. And there was a boy who went home and reenacted something he saw in one of the films, and he killed himself. And the parents tried to sue, and the judge said something to the effect, "Yeah, you got a good case here, but if we rule in your favor, it will destroy public education." So that's a reality. So here they are, taking young children and then teaching them how to commit suicide. And that's something that people don't want to touch. Death education, write your own obituary, visit a cemetery and such. So, and Sam was quite active as a younger man in a lot of different organizations. He was involved with Friends of Algeria when the communists were attempting to take it over, and a lot of his correspondence with different people and the newsletters from the Algeria. I think it was called Integration. We have copies of that. Also, Katanga. Katanga was a province of what is now Zaire, or former Belgian Congo. And Sam was very much interested in helping the anti-communist people of Katanga, Mose Shombe. And he was a friend of Mose, Dr. Shombe, and I have their correspondence. Some of it's in French, some of it's in English, and it's quite fascinating. It's probably available nowhere else but on this site. That's my guess. I haven't seen anything else. In fact, very few people really understand what happened in Katanga and what the UN did in Katanga and how the United States played a role in that. We have his audios. We have 4 pages of audios. There's probably well over 100, maybe, let's see. Yeah, there's probably well over 100 of his speeches all over the country, maybe a few in other parts of the world. He did travel to New Zealand, China, and Canada to talk about these things. And we have these, I just had like 2 big boxes of these cassettes, and thanks to Mark Affleck, my good friend there in Pennsylvania, he was able to convert this history of education, multicultural education, looks say causes dyslexia, evil influences of government school, and on and on. Just so many things. It's such a great resource that it should be taken advantage. And I guess you can probably spend just a month or so, maybe every day in a month, you can listen to all these tapes. We do have videos, not as many as we have audios, but he was a guest on a lot of the audios, or a cable TV show that he did back in the 90s. He was a regular guest and had some great insight. And some of these we're putting up on our YouTube channel, in addition to having them here on the Sam Blumenfeld Library. On the Sam Blumenfeld Archives. Well, it looks like our 30 minutes are up, or is up, and I want to thank you for listening. And I do encourage you not just to go to our website and look into our camp, but look into all the other things we have to offer. And with that, God bless, and until next week. You've been listening to Camp Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet.